Imagine turning this dry, cracked desert floor into a shimmering inland ocean stretching 1,000 kilometers across the heart of Australia. That was the dream. For over a century, engineers and politicians believed they could flood the Outback, create a new inland sea, and transform the continent's climate forever. They called it the Bradfield Scheme, a $200 billion plan so massive it would make the desert bloom, feed millions, and generate its own weather. It sounded like science fiction, but it was very real, and even today the idea refuses to die. Long before any of this, Central Australia actually held an ocean. Countless years ago, the Arramanga Sea covered much of the continent's interior. Fossils of marine reptiles and ancient ammonites still lie buried beneath the red earth, a reminder that the Outback was once teeming with life. When European explorers arrived in the 1800s, they carried legends of this lost sea. Men like Charles Sturt journeyed into the red centre, expecting to find a great inland lake. Instead, they found nothing but dust and silence. Sturt wrote that it looked as if a great convulsion had torn the land apart, but the idea of an inland sea never vanished. It waited for someone with the vision and the ego to try to bring it back. That man was John Bradfield. In the 1930s, fresh off designing the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Bradfield proposed one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history. His plan was to capture floodwaters from Queensland's tropical rivers and redirect them south into the Lake Eyre Basin, a massive depression 15 metres below sea level. He wanted to carve a 2,300-kilometre network of dams, tunnels and canals that would pour the wet season's excess into the desert, creating a permanent inland sea larger than Belgium. Bradfield believed it would cool the continent, provide hydroelectric power, and turn barren soil into fertile farmland. To him, this was Australia's version of the Panama Canal, only bigger, bolder, and entirely homegrown. At first, the idea seemed unstoppable. The country was deep in the Great Depression, desperate for jobs and hope. Newspapers hailed the proposal as a national miracle. Politicians promised it would unite the country and end drought forever. But as the science caught up with the vision, the dream began to unravel. Engineers realized the scale of what Bradfield was proposing. To fill the Lake Eyre Basin, they would need more than 300 cubic kilometers of water, 600 times the volume of Sydney Harbour. Even if they could move that much, the desert's heat posed a fatal problem. With temperatures soaring above 40 degrees Celsius, water would evaporate faster than rivers could refill it. And there was another problem: salt. Because the basin has no natural outlet, every drop would eventually turn brackish. Year by year, salt would concentrate until the sea became a lifeless, hypersaline crater. The numbers made it clear: the sea would vanish as fast as it was filled. If you're into stories like this, massive, forgotten projects that could have rewritten history, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps us keep digging into the incredible ideas that almost changed our world. Despite the warnings, Bradfield's supporters pressed on. He argued the plan would create jobs, fight drought, and put Australia on the world stage as a technological powerhouse. But by the 1940s, the enthusiasm had run dry. The projected cost ballooned to the modern equivalent of $200 billion. Then came the example that sealed its fate. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union tried something similar, diverting rivers to feed the Aral Sea. Within decades, it collapsed into an ecological disaster. The water vanished, the land turned to salt, and entire communities were poisoned by dust storms. Australia watched and quietly shelved its inland sea. For decades, the Bradfield Scheme became a historical footnote, one of those grand visions filed away with flying cars and undersea cities. But like every ambitious dream, it refused to stay buried. In 2020, a new proposal emerged, the Australian Inland Sea Project 2.0. This modern version promised to do what Bradfield couldn't, using renewable energy to pump desalinated seawater inland. The idea was to build massive solar-powered desalination plants along the coast, purify the water and push it 600 kilometers through underground pipelines into the Lake Eyre Basin. Supporters claimed the salt content could help reduce evaporation and even trigger new rainfall through lake effect weather patterns. Some architects imagine futuristic solar cities built around the new shoreline. Skyscrapers powered by clean energy, surrounded by algae farms and biofuel plants. It sounded like utopia. But critics were relentless. Even with today's technology, the costs were astronomical. Building the pipelines and desalination facilities alone would exceed $200 billion. Scientists warned that a saltwater sea would sterilize the land and make agriculture impossible. Indigenous leaders condemned the idea for a different reason. The lake, known as Thanda to the Arabana people, is sacred ground. Flooding it would erase thousands of years of culture and songlines that connect their identity to the land. Elder Aaron Stewart said, "Our stories are written in this land. You can't drown them." The ethics became as heavy as the engineering. Even if the project could be built, the economic logic didn't hold up. Australia's prosperity comes from mining and coastal development, not inland farming. Spending hundreds of billions to flood the desert felt out of step with reality, especially when many rural communities still struggle to afford clean water. As one observer put it, building an inland sea while people can't pay their water bills is like ordering smashed avo while your mate can't afford toast. Studies by the CSIRO and the Queensland government confirmed the verdict. The numbers didn't work. Evaporation, water scarcity, and ecological damage made it nearly impossible to justify. In 2025, a regional assessment panel once again declared the project not viable. Still, curiosity remains. What would actually happen if Australia built it anyway? In the first year, the Lake Eyre Basin would fill to roughly 30% capacity, forming a shallow inland lake visible from space. By year 3, salinity would spike, tinting the water turquoise. By year 10, rainfall in nearby regions could increase by as much as 15% as new microclimates formed. And by year 50, the result would be unpredictable. Either a stable new marine environment or a collapsing salt desert. It would be beautiful and tragic all at once, a shimmering monument to human ambition and hubris. Ironically, nature already does this on its own timeline. Every decade or so, heavy monsoon rains flood the Lake Eyre Basin naturally, creating a temporary inland sea that attracts birds, fish and wildflowers from across the continent. For a few months, the desert becomes a mirror to the sky. And then, just as quickly, it dries up. That rise and fall, that cycle of flood and drought, is how life in the outback survives. It doesn't need to be permanent to be powerful. The story of Australia's inland sea is more than a blueprint. It's a reflection of who we are. Humanity has always tried to bend nature to its will, to carve rivers, move mountains, and fill deserts with water. The Bradfield Scheme represents both our genius and our arrogance. To some, it's a lost opportunity to reshape the continent. To others, it's a colonial fantasy that should stay buried under the red earth. But one truth remains: the outback isn't empty. It's ancient, alive, and sacred. It doesn't need an ocean to make it whole. As droughts worsen and water grows scarce, the debate will rise again. Australia loves an underdog story, and there's nothing more underdog than a desert standing its ground against the sea. If you found this story fascinating, hit like, subscribe, and share it. And tell me in the comments, should Australia flood the outback to fight drought, or leave nature to run its course? Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious and stay reasonable.